So with The Batman recently releasing in theaters, I figured now was as good of a time as any to, well, quite frankly, keep talking about Batman. So in today's video, we're gonna rank the Batman films. And as always, just keep in mind that this is one man's opinion. There is no definitive right or wrong when it comes to ranking these films. So with all that being said, please let me know in the comments what your rankings look like. And without further ado, let's jump right into it.
And here we go.
The best of the best when it comes to pre-Nolan Batman is gonna be Batman '89. Now, if you think Robert Pattinson or Ben Affleck were the first controversial castings for Bruce Wayne, you would be wrong.
Wrong, 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 wrong. Wrong, 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 wrong.
There were more than 50,000 complaints sent to Warner Brothers when people heard that Michael Keaton was going to be cast as Batman, because people said all he does is comedy, he would be too funny to play the character. And then this movie dropped, and a lot of people still consider Michael Keaton their Batman to this day.
I'm Batman.
It's almost like casting directors know how to cast actors for movies.
Whoa.
And this film just deserves so much credit for everything Batman that has come out since its release. Without Batman '89, there is no Batman the Animated Series. There is no Arkham Asylum and Arkham City and Arkham Knight. And the entire landscape just wouldn't be what it is today.
You're goddamn right.
This film just brought the character of Batman back to the mainstream. Michael Keaton strikes a great balance of humor as Bruce Wayne and then the darker side as Batman. Jack Nicholson is amazing, as always, as Jack Palance, just slowly losing his sanity throughout the runtime. And I thought the Joker was just the perfect choice for the first Batman movie in, what, over 20 years? As far as getting people reinvested in this world. Joker might even be more popular than Batman himself.
I will fucking kill you.
The movie overall just does a great job of incorporating some of that late 80s, early 90s goofiness while still taking itself serious enough when it needs to. And then Danny Elfman's score, along with his Batman theme, is probably still the most recognized theme over 30 years and 8 Batman movies later. Batman '89 holds up way better than any movie in this franchise pre-Nolan. And hey, since we're talking about Christopher Nolan, we're now in the top 4, so let's start talking about that trilogy. At my number 4 is gonna be The Dark Knight Rises. This was, of course, the finale of his trilogy, and while I love this movie, to me there's a pretty big gap in quality when it comes to his first 2 films and then this one. I have no issues with Bane. I absolutely loved that character. I think Tom Hardy just does such a great job of coming across so calm and level-headed, but at the same time, so damn intimidating.
I'm in charge.
Do you feel in charge?
After the chaos and insanity that was Heath Ledger's Joker in the previous film, they went a completely different direction here, and I personally think it was the right way to go. And then, of course, the scene where he breaks Batman in half, iconic.
Oh, your buddy!
The voice also didn't bother me the way that it seems to bother other people, but again, I'm not a big comic nerd, so I didn't really have any expectations as to what Bane should be going into this movie, so I was fine with the voice. Everybody in the movie does a great job. It's obviously wonderfully cast. I have no issues with the acting. Well, except maybe that one moment. You all know what it is. My issues with this movie are more related to Batman himself and how we don't really get to see much of him. And most of the scenes that we do get, he's just like in the middle of broad daylight. Batman is the shadows, damn it. He's not supposed to be out there when it's 3 in the afternoon and sunny. Something about that just takes away the element of fear to me. And my other major issue here is that there are just a lot more plot holes and plot conveniences in this film compared to the first two. But just to be clear, saying that this is the worst of the Nolan trilogy isn't me saying this is a bad movie. It's a great movie and a really good finale to one of the best trilogies of all time. So starting off, my top 3 is gonna be Batman Begins. And I had a really hard time not putting this in my number 2 spot. Like I've said many times before, I'm always a sucker for a good origin story, and this one is amazing. Out of all these live action Batman movies, this is the only one where we truly get an origin story. Like, I know we've seen his parents being murdered multiple times, but this is the only time that we get to see the training that he went through and him becoming the Batman. There's something about seeing who this person was before they put on the mask that just always kind of speaks to me. I love seeing Bruce's inner turmoil when he's debating about killing this man who murdered his parents. I love that he is flawed and very traumatized from his past, and I love that he has to learn how to be Batman. Like, a lot of the stuff doesn't just come natural to him. You see him fuck up a lot in this first movie. Personally, I think Christian Bale is hands down the best actor when it comes to playing both sides of this dual personality. Like, he does so well as the pretentious playboy douchebag Bruce Wayne.
You see, I'm buying this hotel and setting some new rules about the pool area.
And then he does equally well as the dark, brooding Batman.
What the hell are you? I'm Batman.
Scarecrow is one of my favorite villains, and I love everything that Cillian Murphy does as an actor, so everything was great about him. I honestly wish he would have been more of the focus than Ra's al Ghul, but that's just a personal opinion. I completely understand why they went the way they did. Student versus master, always a great angle. I really enjoyed the chemistry of Batman and Gary Oldman's version of Jim Gordon in this movie. In this city where everybody seems to fear the Bat, Gordon never blinks. And there wasn't really anything I disliked about this movie. I love it. The fact that there are 2 entries above this just goes to show how great these top 3 truly are. Oh boy, oh boy. If my Batman vs. Superman at number 8 wasn't controversial enough, this is where the hate comments start coming in. At number 2 is gonna be The Dark Knight.
Boo this man!
So by process of elimination, you all know what my number 1 is, but let's talk about this movie first. And what else can really be said about this movie that hasn't been said a million times before? It's a masterpiece. It's one of the greatest movies ever. Heath Ledger gave us one of the best on-screen performances, and still to this day, the best on-screen villain we've ever seen. And honestly, I just don't know if we'll ever get a better villain than Heath Ledger's Joker. Like, in our lifetime, I don't think we will.
You're crazy.
I'm not. No, I'm not.
The Dark Knight just took everything that was great about Batman Begins, elevated that to the next level, while adding some new characters, including the greatest version of the greatest villain of all time. I personally prefer Maggie Gyllenhaal's take on Rachel over Katie Holmes. And The Dark Knight was also more along the lines of like a crime drama out of all 3 of the Nolan films, which is probably why it worked for me so well. I was a big fan of how much they used just practical effects here and didn't just make this movie an entire CGI mess. Hell, that truck flipping over, that's still one of the most talked about scenes, and they actually did that.
He missed!
I would say 90 to 95% of people probably still consider this like the gold standard of Batman movies, and I completely understand that opinion. I felt the same way for the last 14 years. A performance that I think gets oftentimes overshadowed and it doesn't get talked about just because he's in there with the Joker is Aaron Eckhart as Harvey Dent. He does so good as both the White Knight District Attorney for Gotham, and then eventually Two-Face. The only thing this film got wrong was killing him off so soon after introducing his character. I've always been somebody who appreciates when movies have like an underlying theme, and that is something that Nolan did so well with his entire trilogy. Batman Begins was about facing and overcoming your fears. The Dark Knight was all about how to deal with anarchy and chaos. And then The Dark Knight Rises was about how to work through your pain to do what's right. I absolutely adore all three of these films, but The Dark Knight just narrowly, and I mean narrowly, beat out Batman Begins for my favorite of the trilogy. And coming in as my #1 movie in the franchise is The Batman.
Why would you say something so controversial yet so brave?
Now, I just recently did a 20-minute review of this movie, see up here, where I acknowledged that this film isn't gonna be for everybody. It doesn't have the wide appeal that The Dark Knight has. If it worked for you, it's a masterpiece. And if it didn't, you're probably gonna have a lot of issues with it. For me personally, this is the Batman movie I've been waiting my entire life to see.
I'm vengeance.
It has a heavy focus on Batman actually being the world's greatest detective, which no other movie really chose to focus on. It has elements of a dark detective noir, a horror movie, a psychological thriller, and a murder mystery with some action in there. And The Batman is easily the darkest entry in the entire franchise. This isn't a movie I would call fun for the whole family. It is rated PG-13, but I felt like this movie really towed that line, and they did everything they could to get it as close to that full R rating without pushing over into R. And just the idea of Batman hunting down a serial killer, that was enough to get my foot in the door and get me excited for this universe that Matt Reeves is creating. And in his first outing, he absolutely knocked it out of the park. Paul Dano was incredible and terrifying as this darker take on the Riddler. Zoe Kravitz is competing for my favorite Catwoman. Colin Farrell did so good as the Penguin that you honestly didn't even know it was Colin Farrell.
I got you! I got you!
And then finally, Jeffrey Wright as Jim Gordon was a character I didn't expect to see so much through the runtime, but I am so glad that I did. I absolutely loved the dynamic between him and Batman. It really did feel like a buddy cop movie at times between them. And then finally, Robert Pattinson was absolutely the highlight of this film. Like every dark alley he walked out of, or every room that he walked into, everybody's eyes were locked onto this man. I have never felt the levels of fear and dread in any Batman movie the way I did in this one. And that's something I've wanted for so long. Like, sure, people are afraid to get their ass beat by Batman. They're afraid he's gonna take them to jail. But these people are terrified of this man. When these thugs just look down the alley after seeing the bat signal, and they're so scared that he's gonna pop out, chills.
When that light hits the sky, it's not just a call. It's a warning.
And I mean, just finally a Batman movie where Batman is the star, not his villain. As much as I love Christopher Nolan movies and some of the earlier ones, Batman was never really the focus. The villains always kind of took the movie over. And in this version, the villains are used sparingly enough that they add tension and suspense, but they don't take the screen over. This is Batman's movie. And as long as I'm being controversial, Pattinson has easily become my favorite version of The Dark Knight.
Okay, kill him!
For all the people out there that are still refusing to watch this, or just say it's bad simply because he's in it, you're lying to yourself. Twilight was over a decade ago. Let it go.
Let it go, let it go.
But that's gonna do it for my ranking of 10 live-action Batman films. As always, please let me know in the comments what your rankings look like, where you agree with me, where you disagree with me. As always, I'm anxious to read those comments, especially with some of my takes here. And while I have you, me and some friends do a pop culture podcast called Culture Shocked. The link for that will be down in my description, and of course you can get that wherever you get your podcasts. We actually just did an episode on all the Batman films leading up to the Batman, and then we did a podcast on the Batman. So if you want some more Batman content, check those out, let me know what you think. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing right over here so you don't miss any upcoming content. To see some of my other types of videos, movie reviews, rankings, video game tier lists, stuff like that, you can see some of that right over here. And as always, we'll see you in the next one.